For years, people have wondered whether the universe has an end. But then Stephen Hawking came into the picture, and with his astonishing theories about the great beyond, he made us question everything we've known about the Big Bang. Join us as we talk about Hawking's view on the origin of the universe and reveal the truth behind its existence. Back in 2005, Stephen Hawking proposed a theory about how the universe might have begun as a tiny, dense point, sort of like the South Pole, that expanded as time moved forward. According to his idea, the early universe went through a rapid expansion called inflation, growing enormously in a tiny fraction of a second. This expansion created slight irregularities or differences in the universe's early structure, leading to the formation of galaxies, stars, and eventually everything we see today. Hawking's theory suggests that our universe's beginnings might have been shaped by these tiny variations, and it's these variations that laid the blueprint for the structure of our entire universe. He built this theory by giving an example of the Boshongo people of Central Africa. A long time ago, these people believed there was only darkness, water, and their great god Bumba, until one day Bumba developed an awful stomachache and vomited the sun. The sun ended up drying some of the water, leaving behind dry areas of the land. And as Bumba kept vomiting, out came the moon, the stars, some animals, and eventually, humans. The reason behind this story was to explain why we exist and where we come from. There are many theories about how humans became smart over time as well. Some said the world began in 4000 BC, but others weren't sure if everything in the universe started at a particular time. They thought maybe the world was always here, or showed up when humans did. Aristotle, a famous Greek philosopher, thought the universe had been around forever. He believed that something that lasts forever is better than something that was made. And the reason why we see progress or evolution is because of disasters like floods that kept setting civilization back to the start. While Aristotle was sure that the Earth always had a reset button, there were still a lot of people who believed that the universe had no beginning. They didn't want to say a divine power created it all, but others who thought the universe began because of a higher power had a different idea. They said it implied that there must be a god who started everything moving. While that's still debatable, if you want to capture the world, or at least the moon, in your hand, then own a stunning piece of our moon miniatures and make it the centerpiece of your own universe. Click on the website link in the description box below for more details. Before Einstein's revolutionary theory of relativity, people wondered about what happened before the universe began. Some thought time was always there, stretching infinitely into the past. But others questioned why it took forever for the universe to start or to get to this point. But then came Einstein, proving everyone wrong. He proposed that space and time were no longer absolute and didn't have any fixed background to events either. Instead, both space and time are shaped by what's in the universe. So talking about a time before the universe is like asking for a point south of the South Pole. It just doesn't make sense. Before the 1920s, people thought the universe had never really changed. They figured time could stretch back forever. But then Edwin Hubble looked through a huge telescope and changed everything. Hubble was an extremely clever scientist who looked at galaxies and made a shocking discovery. He found out that these galaxies were moving away from us, and that the farther they were, the faster they traveled away. This observation proved that space itself was stretching out as well. So if the galaxies are spreading out now, they must have been closer together in the past. If we keep this theory in mind and take a trip down memory lane, say around 15 billion years ago, then the universe would have been all scrunched up. But because the rules of physics wouldn't make sense here, most scientists still argue against this theory. And since they couldn't say something like God set it all off, they resorted to other theories. For example, the steady-state theory. The steady-state theory says that the universe always looked the same, and new galaxies kept forming as others moved away. But when scientists made some observations, they found more faint radio sources than this theory predicted. This meant that things were different in the past. And because of that, the steady-state theory was crossed off. Now, some scientists have tried to avoid the idea of the universe having a beginning by suggesting it might have gone through cycles, much like a bouncing ball. They thought that after everything squeezed together, it would bounce back, avoiding a dense beginning. And this idea was proved by two Russian scientists who looked into it. Lifshitz and Kolotnikov thought that if the universe shrank unevenly, its parts would miss each other, making the universe expand again while keeping its density finite. This idea was helpful for some Soviet scientists, as it dodged tricky questions about how the universe began, fitting well with their beliefs. But when Stephen Hawking teamed up with Roger Penrose to check their claim, they found out that the universe couldn't bounce like that. According to Einstein's theory, there should be a point where everything was infinitely dense and time began. And then later in 1965, scientists stumbled upon another fascinating discovery. They found faint microwaves all over space, which proved that the universe was once very hot and packed. And as it expanded, the heat faded, leaving behind these faint microwaves we can still detect today. Hawking and Penrose figured out that the universe must have had a beginning, but their math wasn't able to explain how that was possible. Not only that, but since Einstein's theory couldn't handle the intense conditions at the beginning of everything, it couldn't predict how it all began or how it changed afterward. Some people, like Pope John Paul II, believed that God decided how the universe started in a way we couldn't understand. At a science conference in the Vatican, he said it was fine to study the universe after it started, but not to poke into how it began because that was God's job. However, despite that, most scientists still want to know more about the unknown. They think that these findings mean that Einstein's theory needs an upgrade. Why? Because you can't apply the theory in areas with a strong gravitational force. Instead, there needs to be a new theory that combines Einstein's ideas with quantum theory, which deals with really tiny stuff. Usually, quantum theory doesn't matter much for big things like the universe, but when the universe was a small, dense phenomenon, that's when quantum rules kicked in. To understand how the universe began, Stephen also suggested following Feynman's idea. Feynman was a fascinating physicist who proposed the concept of considering every possible way something could happen, from one state to another. It's like saying a system can go from point A to point B by taking every imaginable path. Some of these paths might seem wild, like one where the moon is made of cheese, but they have tiny chances of happening. We can figure out the chance of the universe being in its current state by considering all the ways it could have ended up like this. But where did these possibilities start from? This is like asking about the origin of everything. Does it need a creator to kick things off, or is there a scientific law that decides how it began? This question would pop up even if the universe went on forever, but it's more pressing when it's only been around for about 15 billion years. When we think about the start of time, it can sound like the time when people believed the world was flat and wondered what happened at its edge. Back then, it turned out the world wasn't flat but curved, and time seemed separate, like its own thing, different from space. However, when we consider Einstein's theory and then take a look at quantum theory too, that's when things change. Like we mentioned at the start of the video, this theory suggests that the universe began as a small dot, kind of like the South Pole. And as time moved forward, the universe expanded too, just like heading north from the South Pole. To make this easier to understand, Stephen Hawking thought of time as degrees of latitude, saying the South Pole might be where time begins, but it's just like any other spot. The same rules of nature apply there as everywhere else. This solves the old problem of the universe having a weird starting point, where everything breaks down because it follows the same scientific laws as anywhere else. Stephen also said that he imagined the universe being created like bubbles forming in boiling water. Most bubbles pop up and vanish quickly, like mini-universes that don't last long enough to make galaxies or life. But a few bubbles grow big enough to keep expanding. They're like the universes we see, starting to expand faster and faster. And that's what physicists call inflation. This inflation in the early universe expanded trillions and trillions of times in a tiny fraction of a second. But this expansion made the universe really big and even. However, it wasn't perfectly even. Stephen said that while there were tiny irregularities causing slight differences in the microwave background from different directions in this theory, when scientists checked this with satellite images, they found exactly the variations his theory predicted. In the early universe, some places had a bit more stuff than others that pulled things together, making those spots slow down and eventually form galaxies and stars, which is why when we look at the sky now, it's possible to locate a faint blueprint of what the universe was billions of years ago. But what do you think? Did the universe actually start out with a big bang, or did it always exist in space and time? Let us know what you think in the comments section below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. We'll see you in the next one.